can't tell you how many terrible jokes have been floating through my head all week in preparation for this, and I'm not a joke teller. But I will say that I do think it is a horrible thing when I'm giving a lecture occasionally and somebody will nod off, except this lecture. Like if you go out in this particular workshop, I think we're successful. So if I lose half the group, how bad could that be? It is astonishing that we all spend about a third of our lives asleep. So if you take that whole chunk, we get to that very last moment of our lives and we turn around and we look at all the moments that led up to that point, a third of them were supposed to be conked out. Now, I'm going to make an assumption that some of you are either accompanying a really bad sleeper or are an unsuccessful sleeper here tonight, so maybe that sliver is a little bit less. And yet, I don't remember getting an owner's manual, do you? About how to sleep. It's almost like we're supposed to know how to do this. And the fact is, it really is about the least obvious thing how to do, except for some individuals. Some individuals are blessed with this capability of saying, night, night, and the lights go out, and don't you hate that? So like they're out and you're sitting there all night long and you don't know how that sleep is evading you, but it clearly can go into another person. Sleep is so evasive because it is literally the opposite of what we use our conscious mind for. If we nod off all day long, by the way, that's a sleep disturbance we're going to talk about, but if you nod off all day long, that's a very, very bad way to live life. You're in danger. So your central nervous system really isn't even wired to do that. In fact, if you find yourself nodding off at inappropriate times, that's a huge sign on the Richter scale that there's an issue. Because when we are alive and awake, every neuron in our body is there to keep us that way in case something were to come around us, like a saber-toothed tiger, that was going to eat us. It is that programmed into our DNA. That said, sleep disturbances are absolutely pervasive throughout our entire culture. And our tax dollars have been at work to try to categorize how much sleep disturbances have penetrated into society. So our National Institutes of Health have done a number of studies, but the ones that touch me the most are the ones that look at young people. We're looking at high school students. And the claim is that about 70% of high school students have a woefully, that's the direct quote, woefully inadequate amount of sleep. So how does that equate to changes in them when they don't sleep? You know how great teenagers are already, right? So you rob them of sufficient sleep and things begin to happen. Their suicide risk doubles without sleep. The amount of obesity increases 20-fold without sufficient sleep. Their level of depression greatly magnifies. Mood problems are magnified tremendously. Poor grades and delinquent behavior, which is a euphemistic term for just being bad boys and girls, right? So things get really, really bad when you're an adolescent. So I guess this is just a problem confined somehow to adolescence, but clearly it's not. We've got 65% of Americans. So just so you don't think that you're like this little sliver of individuals that may be having this problem, we're talking more than half of individuals have either difficulty falling asleep, right? So I've got this one. It's really hard to slow my mind down. They have waking during the night. I've got this one too, where you're kind of asleep and then for some reason you wake up. Or you wake unrefreshed and it happens at least a few times a week. That's 65% of Americans. That's a large number of individuals. And by the way, 50% of it experience all or one of those things almost every night. That's kind of scary when you think about it. And the effect that it has on the human physiology and frame is remarkable. And we're going to go into that so we understand the magnitude of this. In case this kind of statistical information doesn't touch home, when we look at automobile accidents, this is the scary one to me, we see that roughly 20% of them have something to do with poor sleep. It's a lot of deaths, that's a lot of destruction, and it's a lot of changed lives as a result of insomnia or some form of insomnia. So as sleep begins to deteriorate, we have a number of problems that occur, and they occur because the actual sleep mechanism begins to break down. And within the phases of sleep, and there's a lot of discussion about sleep phases, and I'm not really caught up on sleep phases, got to be honest with you. But what I am caught up in is that every single phase of sleep starts to produce for us a building and beneficial effect. We start to calm the body down as we get into the earliest phases of sleep. There's a general loss of muscle tone, and our body disengages from being what's called somatic, which is interacting with the environment, either by using our muscles or feeling sensation. And then the real cool stuff starts happening underneath the hood. Our physiology starts to change. Our respiration rate starts to go down. Our temperature starts to drop a little bit. We go into kind of a pseudo-hibernation as the body's metabolic processes slow down. The active digestion, some elements of it slow down, and some elements of detoxification and cleansing actually increase at night. We start to replenish and repair elements of the cardiovascular system. The brain goes through this incredible housekeeping that occurs where it's not only organizing itself differently from the perspective of ideas and thoughts and emotions, but on a physical level, you're going to learn that the actual washing away of old debris that occurs because the brain's an organ and it creates waste product, just like every other organ in the body, that waste product gets removed during the sleep process. Everything amazing occurs, and then the coup d'etat, all these beautiful hormones start to be released later on in sleep. Mid and late sleep cycles, we start to get refreshment from hormones that we'll learn about, like growth hormone. And we start to feel repair throughout our tissues as long as every single stage of sleep is accomplished in the right order and fully. Now, that's a huge responsibility. Like if you all had to leave and manage all of this, that'd be impossible. We're not going to approach it from the perspective of, okay, now we're going to focus on you getting your growth hormone up or cleansing waves through the brain. We're going to work on a really basic level. But to get there, we have to understand why we're working so hard, because I'm going to ask you, as part of a solution, to work really hard. So I want to give you a payoff for working really hard. I'm manipulating you benevolently right now by telling you all the important things that need to take place during sleep, and as sleep breaks down, what really happens. When we have just one poor night of bad sleep, besides this kind of horrible picture of this lady, hunger starts to increase. We start to develop a greater capacity for the immune system to break down. Our emotional fragility, that what we call lability, increases. And we become extraordinarily unfocused from one night of poor sleep. But if we were to continue that, and the hallmark of this is somewhere between 5 to 7 nights out of a month, that's about all it takes for the risk factors to kick in. Cardiovascular disease, increasing brain degeneration, increasing the risk of stroke, the risk of death, all of it increases dramatically from just 5 to 7 really poor nights of sleep a month. When we look at the effects, and Scientific American published a really interesting article on this in this month's journal, one night of poor sleep itself starts to drop our protective antibodies. So these are the immunoglobulins that are helping you to know what is you and what's not you. And there's, by the way, lots of not you in the world. There's viruses and bacteria and yeast and parasites and cancer cells. Not you. Mutations of the world that don't belong in you. We have a whole vigilant immune system designed to remove those things as long as we sleep. And when we don't sleep, that protective immune system drops by 50%. So we should start to line up the dots, like frequent colds, frequent exposure to yeast that produces and funguses that produces some form of yeast reaction in the body. Easier exposure to parasites. Even the real common parasites that are in organic foods are more apt to take hold in the body. And cancer cells, like, who wants that in their body? So we want the immune vigilance to be there. Our memory drops about 50%. This is one night of bad sleep. I had a really bad night of sleep last night. Self-induced. It was benevolent. Took my daughter out to a late night, but I guess we're both in this position. Think about it, from one night. It gives you a different respect, doesn't it, for the entire sleeping mechanism. There's a hormone in our body called ghrelin. And ghrelin is your hunger hormone. It's the one that tells you, go ahead and eat. That increases, independent of your metabolic activity, by about 28%. That means, regardless of whether you worked out a little or a lot, take whatever it is that is your metabolic need for the day and falsely magnify it by 28%. That's the level of hunger you will endure from one night of poor sleep. And leptin, which tells us when we're full. So obviously ghrelin is going to drive us after a night of poor sleep into more eating. But once we start eating, there's another hormone called leptin that says, okay, you're done. You ever wonder how that worked? It wasn't stomach distension, it's a hormone. By the way, one night, a bad sleep diminishes leptin levels by 18%. That's not a good combination, because you put all that together and your overall hunger then increases by about a quarter. When we say how much you eat and how long you eat, the whole thing increases. So what does that translate to? Obesity. It translates to a change in our body composition, internally or externally. One of the hormones that I think is most critical and never talked about in the body is called growth hormone. Now, we called it growth hormone because in prepubescence and pubescence, it kind of kicks in. And when it kicks in, that's when we see our tiny little babies turn into be young ladies and young men. It's a horrible thing if you're a parent to see that occur. But that's what happens from growth hormone. In adult years, it still is secreted. Now, what do you think we're trying to grow? If we're not getting any bigger, and hopefully we're not getting any wider, what are we growing every day inside of the body? Well, go ahead and look down at your left hand. That left hand that you're looking at isn't the same cell structure that you had a year and a half ago. Completely remade. And, by the way, say goodbye to it, because a year and a half from now, it isn't going to be there. A completely different set of cells is going to take over. Now, my question is, how come it doesn't look brand new every single 18 months? Why am I not getting a renewal here? It's copying DNA in exactly the same imperfections and damages. It's a pretty amazing process. And we eventually kind of degrade into the great ether eventually. But almost every cell in the body, except for precious brain cells, are renewed in about 12 to 18 months. That's the effect of growth hormone. Now, you just went through your whole day today. And one assumption you could make is, hey, great, I was rebuilding my body today. Guess what? Not so much. Growth hormone is very low during the day. Do you know when it loves to come out and express itself? In the early and mid stages of sleep. So during the early and mid stages of sleep, we get these growth hormone surges. And they say, make a new finger, and make a new lung, and make a new liver, and repair that cell, and make some more stuff. Make more of you, and this occurs in the earliest stages of sleep. And then the body starts saying, you know, I guess I have to wake this sleepy machine up. Eventually, I'll start amping up the wakefulness, alertness hormone called cortisol. And I think we probably heard a lot more about cortisol than growth hormone, the stress hormone we call cortisol. But it's a wakefulness, attention hormone. And it starts to amp up in the later stages of sleep. Why? So that we eventually come out of this kind of coma, an induced, beautiful coma that was rejuvenating our body. Now, when growth hormone is expressed, it doesn't turn us all into teenagers, and it doesn't just replenish the body. The brain cells get refreshed, replenished in the process. They are made anew. Our body's physiology in the liver and how it breaks and utilizes sugars is enhanced appropriately. Ultimately, the body begins to have a breakdown of fat cells that occurs when we have good growth hormone release. We're actually burning more fat at night when growth hormone is released appropriately. The body starts to build bone. Anybody concerned about bone loss, nighttime is your best time, because in the presence of sufficient growth hormone and in the absence of too much of the stress hormone, you build a lot of good bone and you replenish bone by causing it to turn over. Old stuff out, new stuff back in. skeletal muscle starts to increase, so we maintain our muscle mass, which is critical as we age. When we look at all of the factors that relate to good and healthy aging, that doesn't mean living to be 600 years old. It means living to whatever life we're supposed to have, but living in that life healthfully. There are very few things that determine that, and when they take all of the data, whether you smoke and drink and what you eat and how you live your life, the two things that seem to matter most to create healthy aging are an enduring purpose. Are you committed to something as you age? Does something light you up and make you feel connected to yourself, to others, to the universe? And number two, do you retain muscle mass? You retain and build muscle mass, protein synthesis, at night. Doesn't occur when we're in the gym. You know what we're actually doing in the gym? We're breaking muscle down. That's why it hurts. But when does it build back up? When we get that really good night's sleep, and that's when protein levels come back up again. And of course, our cardiovascular system, which gets underplayed a lot, gets a lot of attention for heart attacks and strokes, but the fact is it's a very complicated system, an extraordinarily delicate pumping system, and the elements of that pumping system, from the skeleton, from the cardiac muscle that causes the pumping, to the delicate tissues that are lining the inside of all of the tubes, all of the vessels, they get replenished at night also. So when we go into sleep and block the first and second stages of sleep, you get going in sleep, and an hour or two later you go, boing! Or an hour or two later, you're not asleep. You're still flipping the boob tube, right? Looking for something to occupy yourself as potentially somebody aside of you is snoring away. That blocks your growth hormone. And when that blocks your growth hormone, what happens to all of these metabolic processes? All of the cleaning, all of the support, all of the leanness, all of the muscle building, the cardiovascular support, the brain building, what happens to every single one of those things? It goes in the toilet. So when we wake up and we feel like we've been run over, that's the terminology we use. How'd you do last night? I feel like I've just been run over. You've been run over because you did run yourself over the day before, and everybody does. You know what you failed to do at night? Build yourself back up again. You failed to make the conversion from Clark Kent back into Superman every single morning. That didn't happen. It's pretty miraculous what's supposed to happen at night. And then when it doesn't happen at night, it feels more deep, more visceral than just the loss itself. Not to mention possibly the most important and complicated organ of all of them, which is our brain. You're sitting there interpreting, naming, judging the words that are coming out of my mouth. My brain is sitting there trying to look for cues, whether you're still awake or asleep by this point, and trying to understand whether you understand, because I'm really committed to you knowing something tonight that's going to change your life. That's all happening in these intricate electrical activities that are happening in the brain. And we think about the brain as this computer. And how many of you think about your computer and what's going on inside of it, and it's busy cleaning itself? That doesn't happen, right? Every few years you open up the back, it's got some dust, you blow it out, and off you go. That's not how the brain works. The brain is an organic, a biological computer. It's connected. All of the computer circuitry are neurons. They're basically very complicated transistors. And these neurons are wired together intricately to produce emotional centers and speech recognition centers and visual recognition and processing centers. And the most sophisticated computer ever known, ever thought of, is happening from these sophisticated connections. What you see attached to the sophisticated connections right now is called amyloid plaque. If you've been paying attention to a major scourge of disease called Alzheimer's dementia, you realize that it is linked inextricably with the accumulation of that. That doesn't look so good, right? What we're beginning to notice from this is that this plaque is developing and altering the way the nerves are functioning, altering everything about the neurology of the system. Now, we know how this occurs. We know how amyloid plaque develops. So there's an entire pathway. As the body is sitting there making all of these nerve connections, and as the nerves are working and you're thinking, little bits of something called beta amyloid are developing. And this beta amyloid is the precursor to amyloid plaque. Fancy words, little dust bunnies that are going to turn into big dust bunnies in your brain. Now, we have a dust bunny vacuum system in the brain that gets rid of beta amyloid plaque before it turns into amyloid plaque. And that vacuum cleaner system turns on at night. You don't want to sleep. You don't want to do the investment. You don't want to make the changes. There's going to be stuff I'm going to talk to you about. You're going to go, not me. I'm still doing that old behavior. I like the old behavior more than I like sleep. Do you like the old behavior more than you like your brain? And by the way, you won't even know it when you lose it. Everybody else will. That's the sad thing about the whole deal. But I think you all love living, and I think you all love your brains, and there's nothing sadder than having that disconnection occur. Okay, some of you are not biologists, you're economists. And therefore I'm going to appeal to the economic side of you, which is, look, insomnia costs money. It costs money to you personally, it costs money to the entire culture. And in the United States, it translates to doctor's visits, medications, accidents, and loss of productivity. Every year in America, it translates to $100 billion. We want to have this $100 billion and use it to something other than sleep, like to feeding the hungry, educating our youth, helping individuals who don't have health care. You want to do something great for the culture, help everybody to sleep. Because now we'll have, it's like finding $100 billion in our budget. That'd be a great thing to find, by the way, every year. Can you imagine what that would do to our country if we had that? How will we know tonight if we're successful? If I dragged you out here, how will we know if your time here is well spent? Well, number one, I want you to know the 10 thieves. I want you to know the things that rob you potentially of good and healthy sleep every single night. I want you to be able to have a tool to measure your own personal sleep score and know what to do with that and why it might be important to you. I also would like you to understand the essential building blocks. How do you make something? Sleep is not a one object element. It's built like Legos. You put your sleep together. And when you don't have sleep, you think, well, I'll get sleep in a bottle, or I'll do this fancy technique, or whatever you thought you were coming here for tonight. Guess what? Not that. It's hard work. It's hard work. I'm 54 years old. I just figured out how to sleep in the last few years. And it took a lot of hard work. But I sleep great every single night. Now, the building blocks are important, because if you don't know the building blocks, how are you going to put it all together? How do you know what is going to work for you, and how do you know how to fine-tune it to make it work for you? And I'm going to teach you how to create a personalized sleep solution, something that tonight you can begin to put into practice. Something you can use tonight, maybe not in totality. Maybe you're going to wait for the slides to show up, and you're going to wait for the video to show up, and you're going to know what to do at that point. But in the long run, you are going to be able to put all of these pieces we talk about together for yourself. And some will apply to you, and some won't apply to you. But I want you to achieve great, deep sleep night after night, and I want that to occur for you forever. I want your identity to be that, as it is mine now as a sleeper, where I swear to you my identity was the opposite of that for my entire life. Not a sleeper. Now, we got a bunch of things to do, so let's get into it. What are these thieves? What are the things that rob us of good sleep? They steal it away from us, and it's almost impossible to get a good night's sleep if we're engaging in a relationship with these things. This is where you all are not going to hear good news about your bad habits, by the way. Not a pretty picture. You want to like put your fingers in your ears and go la 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 right now. This is the time, and then I'll wake you back up again at the end of it. Alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, the holy trinity of substance abuse. There it is. And we are going to learn tonight how even subtle experiences with these three objects can have dire consequences. When I talk to people about their sleep in consultation with them, and I see new patients every single day, oftentimes sleep becomes a central mechanism that underlies lots of chronic illness that they're experiencing. We talk about these objects, caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, And everybody downplays it. Nobody says, yes, I'm a raging alcoholic and I need help. Because that's not necessarily true. For some it may be, but that's not necessarily true. Everyone downplays this to say, I have maybe a glass of wine every night, or I have something. But it's not placed in the center. It's not said, and I don't know whether this is having an effect on me or not. We're going to learn about the management of blood sugar and the subtle management of blood sugar so it doesn't cause us to stay awake and wake us up in the middle of the night. We're going to learn about body composition and how the amount of fat in our body could be robbing us of good, healthful, deep, sustainable sleep every single night. Stress. How the small stresses and how they snowball and become these huge stresses, how they and our relationship with stress impacts our sleep and could be derailing us from good, healthy sleep. What type of exercise, how we exercise, and when we exercise, your fitness plan and how you engage in it could be disrupting your sleep. It's news, right? We're going to talk about screens. I'm not talking about fancy oriental screens. I am talking about the screens that we stare into every single day in a variety of forms and the impact that that has on the mechanisms that produce the sleep hormones. We're going to talk about noise and what happens to the brain in the presence of even subtle background noise throughout the night. Temperature, its effect on deep sleep. Our family and our pets' effect on us as we sleep. And the most important one, that's going to be the one that probably will bore you the most, and I will wake you up into consciousness and remind you of how important this one is. Our thoughts and our perspective on sleep have a greater impact than any of the other ones all put together. What we do to address our sleep and how much import we place on it produces huge effect for us. How do we figure out if we're sleeping or we're not sleeping, or what's good, right, or broken with our sleep? Now, I refer plenty of people out for sleep studies, and I do that because I'm interested in a few basic organic problems. I'm interested in knowing, are they breathing at night? And we're going to talk about sleep apnea a little bit, but honestly, that's not the focus of this talk. Because I guarantee you, spouses, friends, or maybe the neighbors tell you that you have sleep apnea. And if they don't, your doctor will tell you that. This technology of wiring up the brain to an EEG, monitoring respiration, pulse rate, oxygen saturation of the body, and the variations that occur in muscle movement is a very valuable tool to discern certain organic problems and a really contrived way to get to 90% of the problems that plague Americans. Because when you wire everybody up like this, it isn't really natural. It's not your house. And I don't know how kinky you are, but if you wire yourself up with a bunch of wires at night, I can tell you that's probably your sleep problem. Take them off and sleep well. You're not going to sleep well with all of these things hooked up to you. This is contrived. It's a really good tool and saves people's lives. And yet, we're not going to talk about you all going out and getting yourself a sophisticated sleep study. I put in your packets a really amazing validated questionnaire. Now, I use the word validated because it means that these questions are meaningful scientifically. They relate to certain organic problems. Now, they're not diagnostic. You can't use them alone to discern certain sleep problems. But you can use the interpretation as a tool for revelation. When you fill this out blindly, don't look at what the answers are supposed to indicate, but go ahead and fill these out and then score yourself. Your jaw may drop a little bit because you could know from this questionnaire in a fairly deep way whether you indeed are suffering from some sort of obstructive airway disease when you're sleeping, or whether you have a generalized form of insomnia, which we'll go into in great depth, or whether you have narcolepsy, which is falling asleep randomly in the middle of the day and at the wrong time, or some sort of neurologic disturbance like restless leg syndrome, or whether there's a circadian rhythm, a balancing rhythmic timing problem to your sleep, or whether you're sleepwalking or nightmares, or factors that are influencing your sleep in your lifestyle, or whether this sleep itself is impacting your daily function. We're not going to solve all of these tonight. We're going to solve about 99% of the common presentations and problems. So that includes insomnia. It includes looking at circadian rhythm disorders. It includes looking at your factors that influence sleep and the daily factors that influence whether you're that are subject to the effect of sleep and whether you are a high-performing individual or not because of your sleep. We're then going to build your sleep from the ground up. We're going to grow your sleep. We grow it by teaching you tonight how to implement certain nutraceuticals, how to use some very purified natural compounds to help induce or sustain sleep, and I'll tell you how to use it and why to use it. It is not the solution. It's a tool. It's a help, and you'll learn about what that help is. We're going to learn about stress management tonight, and not in a very general way, but in a very, very specific way. How do we handle our thoughts? How do we turn off the thinking that confronts us at night when we finally are there closing our eyes with the lights off, and then we're stuck with our thoughts and our lists and our plans and our ideas and our roles and our responsibilities, and off we go. We're going to talk about how to exercise in a way that is meaningful for us, that causes us to have sustainable sleep that isn't influenced negatively, but only positively by our exercise. The environment in which we're sleeping, how we're protecting that, certain forms of conditioning, the way we think and how we've conditioned ourselves around sleep itself, and ultimately our diet. What we eat affects how we sleep. And to the degree that we can discern this and figure it out and match it up with our own physiology, we'll sleep perfectly. Now, none of this will work unless you have patience. I tried. I'm a smart guy. I tried for about 50 years. I can't say I did that in my early childhood, but when I became a conscious adult, I tried a lot of things. But I tried them in the way that many of my patients have tried things, which is, oh, try that. Oh, try that. No, that didn't work. Oh, try that. Oh, try that. Or try that. And what happens is that nothing works. Nothing works. Nothing has an effect that it's supposed to be. Patience is really important. If you are unwilling to engage into a patient experiment in your body using all these building blocks, you might as well go ahead and take the pop and pray approach. Pop a pill and pray for a good result. Because that's what happens. You go to the doctor, you say, I'm not sleeping. He says, great, Xanax. Pop, and you pray that it works. Not so good. How about trazodone? We'll pray that it works. Trazodone. Ambien. Klonopin. And we're on and on down the list until we completely exhaust the list itself. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have a role for pharmaceuticals. Listen, I'm like the least dualistic physician on the entire planet. I don't think little white pills are really bad things from pharmacies, and little stinky green and brown pills are awesome things from health food stores. And I don't think that way. I think there's a role for everything. There's an approach for everything, and there's a role for sleeping medications, and every single one of them, and every doctor prescribing them knows the role. The first two words of the role is short term. None of them are designed or supported for ongoing use. Why? Because they screw us up. Common sleep medications like Lunesta and Ambien and Restoril and Klonopin and Xanax and Trazodone and Sonata, they have long-term effects. Those effects include eventually causing mid-sleep cycle waking, where you go back to the doctor and you say, yep, gets me to sleep, but doesn't keep me asleep. Usually the physicians have forgotten this by the time we prescribed it. You go home with it, you come back a few months later and say, now I have mid-sleep waking, and we're not even making the connection to the original medication. They cause dependence, which means the more you take it, the more you have to take it. They eventually abolish the growth hormone peaks. Scary stuff now. You know a lot more now in neuro and physiologic endocrinology than most people. Is this a good thing or a bad thing when we don't have growth hormone at night? When we eliminate these nice surging peaks, is it good or bad? Horrible. And these sleep medications do that. They eliminate the growth hormone peaks. All of them eliminate stage 1, by the way. Gone. There isn't one medication that preserves stage 1 sleep. Many diminish stage 3. I call these medications cotton candy. You ever eat a meal of cotton candy? You can't, can you? Because it looks like more than it really is. What it really is about a tablespoon of pure sugar. But it looks like something. Your sleep looks like a whole night of something. How'd you sleep? It was amazing. Took this little pill, closed my eyes, and I didn't wake up till 8 hours later. Cotton candy. Not real sleep. Can you do it in the short term? Stressful situations, bad physiology, other issues like chronic pain. Can you use these short term, and is it benevolent? Yeah, it's a great thing. Beyond a month, beyond 3 months, really rotten strategy for preserving your health. The scary stuff occurs when we look at the British Medical Journal and start to see that these medications are associated, all of them, with a greater than 3-fold risk increase of the hazards of death when prescribed anything more than 18 pills per year. Oh, and by the way, regular users were 35% more likely to develop cancer. Sound like a good long-term strategy to you? Sounds really good that you're sitting here tonight, doesn't it? It's like, okay, you're doing something really good because many of you, some of you, one of you might be taking this medication on a regular basis. Really good short-term. Very poor strategy long-term. Tapering, do this with people all the time. It isn't that you just go home, please don't tonight, just like throw away your medications. Like Dr. Rachman said, it's horrible, it's causing me cancer, and I'm not going to take this again. You won't sleep, and that'll cause cancer. So don't do that. You've got to work to have you have to have the next stepping stone to go onto, or you'll fall into the water. Don't do that. That's not what I'm saying to do. And there's an art to tapering off of these, especially as long as you've been on them. It's an art, and it can take a long time, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing to take a long time, but it's also a good thing to taper, to come on to normal sleep. But you can't do it unless you know these building blocks, unless you work in a process of putting together small elements in varying quantities, implementing them and seeing if they work. Now, one of the most prolific inventors of all times was Ben Franklin. And he said growth is a process of trial and error. This is where we're getting the phrase. Experimentation. We need to develop, to cultivate an attitude, an awareness of experimentation in our body. Because guess what? The studies on 10 people or 1,000 people or 20,000 people aren't a study on you. We call how many participants in a study an N value. I don't care about N values. I care about an N value of my patient, which is an N value of 1. Personalized lifestyle medicine. What works for you isn't going to work for you. And we need to work and change, manipulate, try things differently, at different quantities, at different amounts. I'm going to give you the building blocks. The tough job is yours. Honestly, I worked really hard on this talk to get it ready for you. Easy job. Doing what I'm going to say, that's the hard thing. Really, really hard to bring about. But we're going to delve into it because I'm going to give you these building blocks now. We're going to put them all together. And you're going to have some ahas tonight. And you're going to have some things that you park because they don't seem meaningful. But maybe one day you're going to go, wow, he may be right about the little blinking red light on my clock. It could be doing something to my brain. It'll be interesting. Don't discard anything. Have a scientist's attitude tonight. Nothing discarded for the N value of you, of 1, until we prove that it isn't helpful for you. Environment. The first element of building your sleep environment is complete and utter darkness. I mean, pitch black darkness. Now, unless you've been in it, you don't know what it is because you think that your room is dark. But when you get into a room and you start to remove the sources of light, it becomes amazing to you the more time you spend in there. Your eyes adapt and you're like, oh, I can see the light from there and the light from there and the light from there and the light from there. We need darkness because a very critical sleep hormone only is expressed in great quantities in darkness. Those of you that have gone out camping know exactly what I'm talking about because even the worst sleepers on the planet when they go camping. Yes, it's a hard ground, and yes, there's a whole bunch of crickets, and yes, everything's going on, but by about 7, 8 o'clock at night, you're out. Cold. Why? Because your body has entrained in a very natural process. It has taken the cues from the environment and built a substance inside of your brain known as melatonin. Melatonin is the great pacifier for sleep. All of the increased stages of sleep that you see depicted on the graph are all supported by this rise and ultimately the fall of melatonin in your body. Melatonin is triggered to release by a gland deep inside of your head called the pineal gland by light. Light inhibits melatonin. Y'all get that? Light inhibits melatonin. We need melatonin for sleep. When your eye perceives light, it won't secrete your sleepy bug. It won't give you the secretion of sufficient amounts of melatonin. By the way, melatonin doesn't just make you go to sleep. It sets the whole clock. The clock in your liver and the clock in your heart and the clock in your kidneys. You got clocks all over your body, and melatonin is the one that synchronizes everybody. Everyone go to sleep. Everybody wake up. Without melatonin, we're not getting the signals. Those organs are not with the party. Your brain is not with the party. You want everything to be nice and asleep and out, and it isn't nice and asleep and out. By the way, most of us have some degree of partial eye closure at night. We think we and are out, but there are slits. Those slits allow varying degrees of light. Those individuals that have smaller slits or complete closure, guess what? They're out cold. And the degree to which the eye slits open at night, I'm not telling you to sew your eyes shut at night. That's not the solution. But the degree to which these slits open and the ambient light exists in the room is completely proportional to the amount of insomnia. The more light in, the more insomnia out. It's just a machine. Now, look around your room tonight. Don't change a thing. Turn out all the lights, what you think are all the lights. And what are you left with? Light. Everything these days. I remember the first little blinking light on a VCR. Do you remember that? And everybody used to say, how do you stop the blinking light on the VCR? Everything now has a blinking light. And if it isn't a blinking light, it's a solid light. If it's a solid light, it's a back light and a far light and down light and up light, and light comes through everywhere. The solution here is get it all to go away. Get it all to be dark. And take every single bit of light that can come in from the outside and get some cheap blackout shades. Amazon has these awesome blackout shades. They're like, $20 to black out an entire window. Wonderful thing. You cannot black it out by closing the curtains. Try it tonight. And when you let your eyes equilibrate eventually, you'll see there is tons of ambient light that floods into us. And if this doesn't make practical sense for you, then spend $9.99. Buy yourself a little sleep shade that you can sleep into at night, a blindfold. Knock out as much of the light as possible. By the way, spend any time in a blindfold and you realize that light is like coming in and burning your retina, from all, you sit there and you're like taping duct tape around your face to try to get the light. That's how much light spills into our rooms. Cut out the light and build your melatonin level. The next element is to deal with the sound that can exist. Now, we think about the obvious. We think about there's someone aside of us that is producing a lot of sound. But sound comes from some really amazing different sources, and we don't really think about it till we're sitting there paying attention to it, and you should do that tonight. You can hear the refrigerator. You can hear the dog walking across the ground. You can hear rustling occur. You can hear outside noise if you're in a more urban area. You can hear the crickets and the katydids and everybody outside if you're out in a more rural place. The only way I know of making this go away to try to entrain your sleep in the beginning is get a pair of custom earplugs. You can't take the little foamy things, jam them far enough in your canal and be comfortable. It isn't going to work and it doesn't block very much out. When you have an inexpensive set of custom earplugs made for you, and go on the internet, find the solutions that are available and follow it. It's easy to do. Everything goes out. Nothing comes in. You kind of feel amazing. You're like in one of these like isolation chambers. You're hearing like your beating of your heart eventually. That's what we want. You want to be able to hear your own breath and have that put you to sleep. If you can't fathom doing that, get a sleep machine. Get some ambient noise that is not going to be variable. Something moving along on a regular basis. By the way, I thought this was a very interesting sleep machine to help you sleep. There's a train on it, city noise, which I always find very soothing to me in going to sleep. And of course, who doesn't like to sleep right aside of a fireplace? So I don't know. The whole thing is very disturbing that they're selling. I think they just had 4 more buttons and said, let's do something absurd. Let's put people to sleep with the city. So as we are moving through changing our environment, temperature becomes critical. Now, this is kind of a sacred cow because some of us like it warm, some of us like it cold. This is how it works inside of the body. The colder it is for you at night, the more your body likes it. We think the opposite physiologically, but our body is entrained to do that. You see in green melatonin levels rising. They are rising when our temperature drops. If your body is busy trying to force its temperature up and trying to evaporate, think menopause, by the way, ladies, you will not go to sleep. You will not rise in your melatonin levels. Cool the room down. If you need to, put a cap on and put some socks on. For some reason, head and feet are remarkably independent of affecting melatonin levels. They can stay warm. And by the way, when you're warm in your head and you're warm in your feet, you pretty much have the perception of warmth in your body. I'm not telling you not to use covers. Make the room cold, colder than you're used to. The average temperature for really successful sleep is somewhere between about 67 and 69 degrees. Much colder than most people sleep with. By the way, if you leave your window open though at night, as long as you can handle the sound itself, you typically are getting a deeper night's sleep because you're cool, especially where we are in the mountains. Okay, movement. Sacred cow, but take your animals, give them a beautiful place to sleep. Oh gosh, I've lost half of you now. All right, then don't do this. But if you've got a little kitty cat walking on your face or your feet, and you go, no, it's so cute, you're not asleep. If you have the warm and fuzzy, people are like, oh, but I love having my animal with me. Who's there to love having your animal there? If you're gone in La La Land, you don't know whether your animal's there or not. Do you follow the faulty logic here? I really love sleeping with my animals. If you love it, you're not sleeping. Is it like the dawn of recognition? Like some of you are like, I don't want to, la, 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 la. Put it aside if it seems too sacred to you, but find something for your animals to do. If you want to sleep well, get them out of your bedroom. Get them as far out and get some earplugs so you don't hear them and their nocturnal activities at night. Also, your family and their habits affects you and your sleep. Household and family noise is one of the key reasons that people don't sleep well. Not everyone's on the same sleep pattern, are we? So you've got family schedules. You got little kids and big kids and relatives, and somebody's in and somebody's up and someone's going to work and someone's going to sleep, and they're all over the place. You're either having your sleep disturbed in the morning or your sleep disturbed in the evening, but something's happening. You've got to have some protection around sleep. If you're an early riser, learn to be quiet so that you don't wake up the people that are still sleeping. And if you're a night owl, learn to be quiet so that you don't wake up the people that are sleeping. But we've got a family situation often that has discordant schedules. And when those discordant schedules interact and you're in the middle of it, you may not get any sleep at all. Because if you're in the middle of the road sleeper, go to sleep kind of a moderate time and wake up at a moderate time, all heck could break loose for you, because you could be left awake by a family member who's sleeping late at night, up late at night, and woken up early by a young child. Suddenly your sleep is nothing. It's been removed. As we are building this environment, we have to pay attention to our bed. Now, what is the average amount of time a mattress is good for? It is not indefinite. Except for the more sophisticated mattresses, somewhere between 6, 7, 8 years, that's it. If you are going home tonight to a mattress that is older than that, I will tell you two things. One, there is more of you in the mattress by then than on the mattress. More of your skin cells, and by the way, there also are more critters by mass than you in the mattress. Get rid of the mattress. Number two, make sure that your bed is used for sleeping plus one. You may do one other thing in bed. That's it. Sleep there plus one. But that's it. Start to entrain that bed and the bedroom as something that is used to relax, to comfort, to draw you inward. Don't pattern your bed as a nice big area for projects and the computer and food. And I've seen individuals lay out an entire town of activities that they just migrate to from place to place on a king-size bed. Conditioning is a big deal. Now, this word may not have meaning to you right now, but I guarantee in about 5 minutes it's going to have a huge meaning. What we talk about with conditioning is that we want to involve cognition, which is what we think about, and behavior to change therapeutically what's going on in our body. And it's a big fancy psychological term called cognitive behavioral therapy, but I got to tell you, it doesn't involve something big and involved. It's very practical. It's not too much for us to talk about or even to deal with tonight, but the basic thought is actually very yogic. We're having this beautiful lecture in an amazing yoga center. This is a pretty yogic philosophy because it says this: what we think about affects how we feel. What we think about affects what we do. It affects our emotions and our behaviors. By the way, our behaviors affect our thoughts, and our behaviors affect how we feel. And by the way, how we feel affects our thoughts, and how we feel affects our behaviors. We cannot deal with one and not deal with the totality. It's a holistic way of looking at us as individuals. We need to change how we feel about sleep, what we think about sleep, and what we do. Now, I've talked about a lot of behaviors, but I want to talk more about the thoughts and emotions about sleep because they get kind of distorted. Our cosmology is how we view something, and our sleep cosmology could really be very disturbing. Now, this is where I want you to pretend you don't have a whole bunch of other people sitting around you right now. I want you to go into kind of your place of just kind of thinking about yourself and how you think about these things. But I will admit to every single one of these, which includes kind of being a little addicted or habitualized around remaining awake. It became my time. It was when there was kind of quiet private time. Nobody was around. You know why? Because they were sleeping, but I didn't care. I didn't care if they were sleeping and I wasn't. I cared that I finally maybe had a little time. I didn't think, hey, maybe I just carve out a little me time in the day. Never thought of that. It was kind of me time all throughout the night, and I got addicted to that me time. When we start out very young, we start to think that grown-ups stay up late. I took my daughter last night to a phenomenal concert, and really I think the biggest thing for her in that concert was that she got to stay up late, and she kept talking about, when will we get home? How late am I going to stay up? Can I stay up all night? Pretty big deal when we're growing up. I don't think some of us lose that. I think some of us equate or ingrain that this is a really good thing that adults do. They don't sleep, they stay up. And that sleep is really a luxury. I'll sleep, I'll catch up on it on the weekend. I got a lot of things to do. It's not really all that important for me to sleep. Think of your sleep in the same way that you think of your meals. Think of your sleep as food for your brain, for your organs, for your skeletal system and muscles. Think of sleep as that which feeds you on a different level. And you will spin the whole cognitive relationship you have with sleep. Suddenly you'll say, oh, in the same way that I treat my food, I buy really high quality food, I shop for it, I try to prepare it well, not cook it out, I try to eat in a good environment, and I try to eat the right amount. Think about all those qualities that we are all, as Americans, developing with food. Like, our awareness is so much more now than it ever has been about how important good quality food is to our lives. Take all of that in your mind, how you think and how you feel, and put all of those feelings and thoughts on your sleep and watch what happens. Because suddenly what you say to yourself internally changes. The words go from, oh, I'm a big boy, I get to stay up. Oh, nobody's around. Suddenly it's like, gosh, I can't wait to sleep and feed myself. Sleep is good. I can't wait to give that to my body. In the same way that you think, wow, when we shop and take the time to do that, that's a great thing. I can't wait to put all of this food into my body. When we look at conditioning, we eventually have to reverse or replace certain bad thoughts, certain ways of thinking. Now, the way that our brain works in the daytime needs to be different than the way that it works at night. And we need to switch gears and be disciplined. Now, this starts to sound a little like meditation. I don't want to take us off track. So let's just talk about it in the world of cognitive behavioral therapy and say, I'm going to give you the tools to start taking your environment about an hour before you go to sleep, the environment of your thoughts and your brain, and shifting it, because we have two hemispheres of our brain. The left hemisphere of our brain is much more linear, much more problem solving and lists and tasks, and by the way, worries. That's where it all comes from. The right side is the creative, expansive, more feminine and flowing part of our brain. It looks at things not as much as being linear, but being a web-like interaction. We need to start to migrate towards right brain thinking about an hour before we go to sleep. Because if you're working on that big project for work, left brain, right up until the time when you're going to turn out the light, guess what part of your brain is active at night? Left brain. Guess what part won't support your sleep? Left brain. Guess what part will worry you sick? You turn out the light and it's still going. Anybody ever have that problem? Turn out the light and the mind still goes? Left brain. You know why your left brain is going? Because you've teased it and fed it right up until the time when you went to sleep. And then we have the nerve to say to ourselves, oh, okay, let's go to sleep now. All left brain dominant. Here's what you do. Besides the sanitizing patterns I'm going to teach you about cleansing your environment and your thoughts before going to sleep for that hour, when you finally go to sleep at night, don't think in terms of words and numbers. Think in terms of images. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Engage your mind around images. Instead of the list, put the list aside. Think about images. Think about what you can remember. Think about what you can do, but don't delve into specific ideas and thoughts. Don't delve into lists, tasks, and numbers. And whatever you do, don't count sheep. Counting is very left brain. It's not very right brain. Don't count your breath. Don't count anything. Turn off the abacus in your brain and allow yourself to drift into a more right brain form of thinking. As your conditioning evolves, we need the behavioral emotional support of family, because if we discern eventually that you need to go to sleep an hour before the family goes to sleep, I'll tell you what is not going to help you is to be shamed. even subtly, will not help. It will erode your cosmology. Now, what would happen if you got hungry an hour before the family? Like really hungry. Like medically you needed to eat an hour before the family. Everybody would say, well, let's get you something to eat. They wouldn't mock you. They wouldn't make you feel bad. They wouldn't say, aw, can't you just go another hour without eating and eat with all of us? Come on, play Monopoly. Come watch TV and don't think about it. You won't need to eat. That would sound kind of silly. And yet, when we replace the word eat with sleep, every permutation of that occurs in relationships. We feel like we're letting somebody down, or they make us feel like they're letting them down. We have a discordant relationship with sleep sometimes because of the way that we are emotionally connected with those that we live with. And that means we need to ask them for help with this. We need to bring this to their awareness. Look, I need sleep. I don't want my brain to turn into jello. I like it the way it is. I want my body to be strong. I want to replenish it. I need sleep differently than you need sleep. Please, I need your support. Ask for it. Ask for support and enthusiasm. What would it be like if you said, I'm going to sleep, and like the family stood up and clapped for you? You'd be like Rocky, you're going up the stairs and your arms are going and you're like going to sleep. You're a champion. That's how you should feel going to sleep. Like you're successful at something. You're not failing your day or the last few hours that you can squeak in work. You're successful. It's a change in the way that you think about it, but it doesn't involve shame. Move that out of the equation. Self-shame, which is the worst, or shame from others. As we move into our conditioning, we have to change our rituals at night. Because for some of us, our rituals are, we're going to work all the way right up until the last moment. Oh, we're going to get that last project done. Oh, I can start this thing for myself finally. Our rituals need to move us to right brain thinking. They need to get us into more expansion. One philosophy is to create something called Amish hour, where you are literally removing all of the accoutrement of advanced modern technological living. You're reducing ambient light. You're reducing screens. You're moving all the stuff away. And as we do that, as we pull ourselves apart from all of this stuff, we eventually can move into the patterns, which include a little snack. Your ritual at night should have a little snack associated with it. Now, this is going to make a lot of sense to you when we look at blood sugar in a moment. But in order to maintain and sustain sleep, you need a little bit of fuel before you go to sleep. Now, this is not an opportunity tonight to create exactly what you need to consume, because I don't know that, and you won't know it now. It needs a certain amount of fat, a certain amount of carbohydrate, and a certain amount of protein. If those are foreign terms like what contains those things, it's easy to educate yourself about it. But the amount of that I can't tell you. I don't know whether you're a couple slices of apple, which is almost all carb, and you'll be out cold and stay out cold. Or whether you need to take apple and put some almond butter on there, which has some protein and some fat associated with it. Or whether you're the slice of turkey person, which is almost all protein before you go to sleep. I don't know that. Experiment. Whatever it is probably not going to be enough. We all think, oh, a little snack. We get the smallest plate out of the cabinet, we put little things on there, and we go have the snack. If it positively influences your health and your sleep, eat more the next night, and more, until you're out cold through the night. If it doesn't, change the composition around. Now you can see we're going to be talking about a lot of variables eventually. You're going to have a lot of homework to do. One of the switches, the changes is, what is that snack? But it is a very rare physiology in my experience for a person to be able to go from dinner all the way through 12 hours and not have the machinery break down somehow by not having enough fuel. And that causes poor quality sleep that in some individuals wakes them up. Take a nice, soothing bath. Water, heat, warmth, take the lights down, has an amazing pacifying and sedative effect. You can put in the bath water or in your environment some essential oils. Probably the most famous that has an effect that's very beneficial is lavender, but things like vetiver and frankincense have wonderful sedative effects to the body. Incorporate that. How our olfactory senses, what we smell, influence the brain is just a small part of neurology that we're just starting to understand, but smells matter. They evoke emotions. And certain smells are known to evoke the right brain dominance. And use them to your benefit. Practice a principle of mindfulness called pratyahara. Pratyahara, which means to withdraw the senses. It's a really beautiful thought because in the daytime, we're doing the opposite, aren't we? We're engaging our sight, we're engaging our smell, we're engaging our taste, we're engaging our hearing, we're engaging our touch with the outer world. I'm asking you for an hour before you go to sleep to start to pull that back. Unplug yourself from the world. Every bit of screeny, weeny time in that hour before you go to sleep is robbing you of what critical sleep hormone? Melatonin. You can't have the lights and the screens in your face, the TV's on, phone's in your hand, tablet and thing, and it's all going at you. Turn out the lights and then expect melatonin to show up. Doesn't work that way. You grow it slowly. You need that hour of developing it. So those lights aren't on full blast in your bathroom when you're preparing. They're dimming down. The lights in your room are dimming down. The screens are going off for that last hour. I just found this really cool app that does something amazing even before that hour. And the app is called Flux or Flux. And what it does is it realizes that most of our screens have a lot of blue. And blue light, which you see in that kind of blue purplish high peak, is the most sensitive light to disturbing melatonin and suppressing melatonin level. So you type into this app on your computer or on your phone or your pad where your location is. And automatically this app starts to know where the sun is in the day and starts to change the level of blueness down. Slowly, you don't even know it's happening. Now, I work, my wife works, we try to give our children as much of that time as they can have until they go to sleep of our time, and then we usually have some work. So we work, and as I'm working there on this screen, and I'm starting to use this app, it's remarkable to recognize how little impact it has even several hours before going to sleep. Things get really dim, but you don't notice it. And as long as you don't then go out into bright light in some other room, you're entrained to go into that Amish hour and start to put all of the senses to bed. Play something ambient and soothing. No words. Remember, words are left brain. No beat. Beat is left brain. You want right brain. Swirly, whirly, yoga, Zen, meditation, ambient music. No tune. It's going to stay in your brain while you're going to sleep. Nothing. Just no words. Just right brain sounds. Conditioning involves taking ourselves all the way through to something called precision timing of your sleep. Now, if you thought everything I asked you to do up until now was hard, put on your seatbelts. Because this is really the work. This is really where you go in and have to make some changes that are interesting. Precision timing says that perfect sleep doesn't come from saying you want to sleep for 8 hours. I'm an 8-hour sleeper. If I get 8 hours, I'm great. Throw the notion away. There are 3 elements that need to be tweaked to get yourself into the deepest form of sleep and stay in the deepest form of sleep. 1, what is the time when you're going to sleep? The time that you're going to sleep, the actual physical time. What is the time that you're going to wake up? And the factor of that, of course, becomes duration, but it's independent of one or the other. You may need a sleep time that's much earlier than you think or much later than you think. And you may need a wake time that's different than that. Most of us think in terms only of duration. I'm going to encourage you to think about the totality of this. Now, these old charts that we used to use and say, well, at every single age, we need a certain amount of sleep, so get that amount of sleep. That works really well up through the teen years and then throw it away. Because for most of us in this room, there's no range that exactly is going to help you. What you need to know, N value of 1, research study of just you, personalized lifestyle medicine, you need to know for you what the amount of time that you need is, when you're supposed to be going to sleep, and when you're supposed to be waking up every day. Your brain doesn't know weekends. This is a concept that has nothing to do with the brain. It doesn't even think about a day being different than another day. It likes consistency. Now, there's one consistent element here. I can tell you how we're going to fine-tune this in a moment, but if you want to just short-circuit it and make your life easy without going through a lot of effort, get yourself into bed and that Amish hour completed before 10 o'clock. Get yourself into bed and the completion of that Amish hour has already happened by 10 o'clock because something physiologically shifts in the witching hour of 10 o'clock in the brain for most of us. We start, have you ever felt that? You're like, I'm a little drowsy. Yeah, I could definitely, oh, it's 10 o'clock. And we're like up again. You feel the liftoff that occurs if you delay your sleep long enough. The break point is about 10 o'clock. Now, I think that's highly generalized. And I want to teach you the incremental approach to all of this, which is, remember this, 20 minutes matters. Can you all say that? 20 minutes matters. I want you to hear it from your voice into your own ears because this is a huge aha. Just adjusting your sleep by 20 minutes and changing the two levers, the two ends of the sleep spectrum, your time going to sleep and your time waking by 20 minutes can have a huge effect. We all have been conditioned to think, well, lights out by 11, I'm good to go. 11, wake up at 6, I'm off to go. Experiment in 20-minute increments, just for giggles. Go to sleep at 10:40. If you normally, God bless you, go to sleep at 11 o'clock. Try 10:40. What happens will shock you because many of us think, if I go to bed a little earlier, I'm just going to wake up a little earlier. And that may be true for some of us. But you don't know until you try this and go to sleep 20 minutes earlier and go, wow, I wound up sleeping deeply for another whole half hour. That doesn't make any sense. Sleep doesn't make sense that way. There is a physiology inside of us, our own circadian clock, that has a time and it knows the time. And guess what? It's like playing poker. You don't know what that time is yet. And when you figure out your time, you've got your sweet spot. Now, that may be an inconvenient time. You may find out by going incrementally earlier that you're actually a sleeper from 10 to 4. That you're deep, you're out, that's it. You are completely out and get good 6 hours of sleep. That's what you need, and you're up at 4 o'clock. Well, you can't be a milkman or milk lady anymore. They don't have those jobs. So you're going to have to find something to do with your time. Inconvenience is not the same as truth. The truth about your sleep and when you need to wake and when you need to go to sleep is independent of whether it's convenient or not. Experiment in increments of 20 minutes. Now, I'll tell you the very best way to get everything back on the rails, and it's hard. I don't know that you can do this on your own without touching base with a clinician that's going to tell you you're okay through the beginning of this. But I'm going to give it to you, which is called sleep compression. Works every time. Every time this works. Now, it's a counterintuitive thought, which is when somebody comes to me with insomnia and I say, I have a really great idea. What we're going to do is compress your sleep, give you less sleep. And they literally lean into the desk and say, did you hear that I'm not sleeping? Yeah, I heard that you're not sleeping, but we're going to compress your sleep. The reason that sleep compression works is because we want to generate tension. We want to generate a pull of the brain to say, I really want to sleep. You've got to give me sleep. I need sleep, and I want deep sleep, and I want it a long time. I'm sorry so many of my references revolve around our children, but we love our children, and like it's just great to watch and learn about life through kids. Kid comes to the table and says, I don't want to eat that. So you can be a helicopter parent if you want and go, oh, well, look, 24-hour kitchen's open, what do you want to eat? And you just keep changing out stuff until the kid eats that. And it usually winds up being in the food group of hot dogs or pizza or something cheese and gluten together. Or you can say, no problem at all. We'll be back at the table for lunch. Join us then. Now, when you don't sleep well, you can be a helicopter parent to your sleep. I'll give you you don't want to sleep, I'll give you the TV, I'll give you this, or here, what do you want, read a book, and I'll go up, go down, I'll sleep in the weekend, or you can take a nap. You can cater to their dysfunction of all the boys and girls in your head. Or you can say, not a problem. Sleep will be here tomorrow. Come on board. Now, the way that we do that is by compressing sleep. Now, hold on, because this sounds ludicrous, but it works. Create your perfect fixed waking time. Something you can live with, because I'm going to ask you to stay with this for a long, long time. Weekends, holidays, stick with this. Pick your wake time, and I'm using, for this example, 6 a.m. Count back 5 hours. Count back 5 hours. And that's when you are allowed to go to sleep. Now, at this point in time, there's usually a sigh of relief across the desk from me because the person says, you heard that I'm not sleeping. This is not a problem for me. I don't sleep anyway. I can definitely stay up till 1 because I'm up all night long. Do you know what we find out? No one's up all night long. We think we're not sleeping, but we're in and out of different stages of very light sleep, which feels a lot to the brain like not sleeping. I usually get the call the next day, which is, I can't do this. Well, you told me you weren't sleeping tonight. I know, but I'm really tired now. And my answer is, good. Because I want the kid who wouldn't eat to be really hungry for the next meal. Stay with it, I say. Because what we do is go 1 to 6 a.m. until there are 2 consecutive nights of continuous sleep. Now, I don't know whether it's going to happen for you in 1 day or 7 days, but I will guarantee you something. It will happen. And that kid who doesn't want to eat food, if they're strong enough, they'll go a whole day. But I will guarantee you something. They will eventually eat. Your brain will eventually sleep. Compress your sleep until you have 2 consecutive days, nights of sleep. And then make your sleep time 20 minutes earlier. Because, why? 20 minutes matters. So your next sleep time is 20 minutes earlier. So you're not going to go to sleep at that point at 1 a.m. You're going to get a great night's sleep because you're going to get to go to sleep at 12:40. Wow! And then it's still not enough sleep. You go 2 consecutive nights. When you're there, guess when you get to go to sleep? 12:20. And you continue to expand until not so good. Wow, I went all the way back to 10:30. That was a terrible night's sleep. Good. Tighten it back up by 20 minutes because 20 minutes matters. And you're going to hit your sweet spot. It's a wonderful thing. You tighten sleep back up to the previous level, but the fixed wake time has to stay the same. You don't change it. And by the way, you have a bad night's sleep, you've opened it up, and suddenly life is really good. Just tighten it back up for a night. Suddenly your brain goes, oh, I don't want to go through that again. It will go into deep sleep, and you'll open it back up. It's pretty easy stuff. You might start out at 1 to 6 a.m., and then eventually you are not sleeping the first night, you're not sleeping the second night. Wow! The third night, you're out cold, and you're like, this is awesome. More sleep, right? You go 2 consecutive nights. You're going to be really tired. and then you give yourself a little more sleep, 20 minutes. Go more, and then open it up again. Naps. You are looking at the world's best napper right here. Okay, I could nap as soon as the world stops, out cold. Could easily nap anywhere, anytime, any place. Generally, not a great thing to do. I nap before I'm speaking tonight. It's my little revelation, because else my words were not connecting with my brain due to my late night last night. Except for really rare circumstances, you're not going to have good sleep depth if you are making up for that sleep in the middle of the day. Save your sleep for a continual period of time. The brain processes better, cleans better, does all its dirty work at night. Give it to you at night. Save yourself. Now, if you pass out after lunch or you pass out after dinner, you have other problems. You have blood sugar problems. Come see me. I'd love to help you with those. That's not a sleep problem. That's a blood sugar problem. Solve your blood sugar problem. Don't mistake that as, oh, I must not have gotten a good sleep. I'll pretend I'm in Latin America and I'm going to take a siesta. Not true. You're just making up an excuse around a bad physiologic problem. What do you do with your diet? Well, the first thing is take away the really weird sugars and the really weird substances that dink up your brain. I'll tell you why alcohol is really the pits here. Because alcohol is filled with a weird sugar, which is alcohol is a very strange sugar to the body. And alcohol also can take a considerable period of time to leave the body, and its effect on the body is to dehydrate the body. None of those things support good sleep. Even those people that are really good sleepers, we hook them up to EEGs and put a little alcohol in them, one drink sometimes, their sleep degrades dramatically. Take it away. Take it away. Also, remove nicotine, which is a high stimulant. If you're not sleeping well, don't smoke. If you're sleeping well, don't smoke. But if you have to smoke, make sure it is not interfering with your sleep. Try to delay the amount of time as much as possible. If you're really addicted to it, try to give yourself at least an hour between the ingestion so it has a chance of passing. It's a very strong stimulant. Make this part of your Amish hour where you're removing all of these things. And lastly, the weirdest one, and the one that we all kind of love. I love this picture because that's actually the molecule. What a crazy barista. He's a biochemist. He's done the molecule of caffeine. I would go to this coffee shop just to have a coffee cup that looks like this. Caffeine's interesting because the effects last a lot longer in some of us than we think. Caffeine can disturb sleep up to 14 hours from your ingestion. So I talk to people all the time and say, I'm just having my 1 cup of coffee or 2 in the morning. When are you done drinking that? 9, 10 o'clock. When are you going to sleep? 10, 11 o'clock. I guarantee you there's a collision that's occurring there. Caffeine can really disturb your sleep for long periods of time. Your dietary pattern may be a culprit here because there are as many dietary patterns out there now, it shocks me. Just when I thought I have heard every dietary pattern known to mankind, someone, when I'm asking them in case history, what do they eat, they've come up with a brand new one for me that I've never heard of before. Each of them have an effect. They're macronutrients. That means not the vitamins, but proteins, fats, and carbohydrates are affecting their physiology. And each of us may not be best suited for each of these different diets. And the weird thing is the one we gravitate towards may not necessarily be the one that is helping our physiology the most. You may have in your dietary pattern the culprit for why you're not sleeping. And this may take a lot of trial and error and maybe consulting with a clinician, a physician, a nutritionist, somebody that really knows their stuff to help understand and unwind whether your dietary pattern, sometimes it takes some laboratory testing to figure this out, is really matched to your physiology or not. But the bottom line is, how is your diet affecting your blood sugar? Because if you are maintaining this dolphin-like beautiful blood sugar wave, you wake up in the morning and you're a little hungry, so your blood sugar's a little low. You eat and it goes up a little bit, and then you go to sleep and it goes down a little bit, and then you eat and it goes up a little bit. Let's just think sinusoidal dolphin wave. Your brain loves that. It loves that. Every organ in your body stores a little bit of sugar for a rainy day. Your muscles and your heart and your liver, like everything, except one organ. You know what organ doesn't store any sugar? Your brain. It's too specialized. In fact, it's too specialized to even all be contained in this bony cranium. It's all folded up like a bad packing job inside of there. There's too much going on. It cannot handle keeping extra sugar for a rainy day. But it's also the smartest of all the organs, and it controls all the other organs, so it thinks it's got it beat. Look, I don't need to store sugar because I can get my sugar from all the other minions that are working for me. Now, if you're eating a diet that is really causing your blood sugar to not be steady and even, very, very erratic blood sugar levels, do you know what organ suffers the most? Your brain. Your brain suffers the most from this. And when it suffers, when your brain perceives that blood sugar is dropping, that's not okay. Because if it drops too low, do you know what will happen to you? You'll pass out. And if it drops even lower, do you know what will happen? You'll convulse. And if it goes too low, you know what will happen? That's your fuel. You'll die. Your brain is serious about not having low blood sugar. So it will contrive incredible biochemical machinations to keep your blood sugar up. And it's all done under the guise of a single hormone called cortisol. You ever hear of cortisol before? That's the stress hormone. Do you know why the stress hormone is elicited, released, secreted when your blood sugar drops and your brain perceives that? Because your brain at that point is under stress. It thinks it's going to die if that blood sugar isn't corrected. So it will take out the big guns, not the small guns. The big guns come out. And when the big guns come out and cortisol goes up, it's kind of cool for the brain. Because the brain says, well, that's awesome. I'll make cortisol go up and I'll jack that blood sugar up. I'll pull blood sugar out of your liver and I'll pull it out of your muscles, and the brain is going to be happy. Except your level of cortisol will be up. Does cortisol help you to sleep? It's like the anti-sleep. By the way, if your blood sugar drops enough, if the peak is rapid and very deep, your body isn't going to mess around with cortisol. It is going to take out the nuclear bomb of stress called adrenaline, catecholamines. Now, adrenaline is what has grandmothers lifting VW buses up off their kids. It's the strongest hormone in the body and most fast-acting. It causes heart rate to increase, muscle strength to increase, brain alertness to increase. When you're about to die from getting hit by a car or be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, you release adrenaline, catecholamines, to save yourself. Because you are either going to fight that thing, flee, or freeze. But you're going to do something. So you have your dinner. Then you have a little something sweet because you got a blood sugar problem and you don't know it. And then you're not going to do a snack before you go to bed that's balanced for your physiology. And your blood sugar starts to go a little nutso. And then you go a little further in your sleep cycle, and it's going down and down and down. And somewhere around 2 to 3 a.m., it hits the bottom, and it hits it hard. First, let's try cortisol. Release a little cortisol, and you come up to waking, and you go, I have to urinate. I woke up because I have to urinate. I will promise you something. Unless you have prostate problems, and that takes about half of you out of the occasion here, where you're not having sufficient emptying, you are not waking up because you have to urinate. You are urinating because you woke up. Because cortisol said, get up, buddy. Wake up and get some blood sugar going. They're not sending you, by the way, to the kitchen. The kitchen happened. Cortisol went up and it dumped all of the blood sugar out of your liver, dumped it out of your muscles, and your blood sugar is really up there now. It's not a death tool. It is a 50-gallon drum of blood sugar. But you can go back to sleep after that. You think you just had to urinate. But if your blood sugar really tanked, You did the bowl of popcorn because you thought that was healthy. Highest glycemic thing on the planet. Your blood sugar is going to go up and bang, whack itself down, or the bowl of ice cream, or whatever. And you finally hit that 2 to 3 a.m. bottom, and you go too low, cortisol isn't going to work. Then your body releases adrenaline. Guess what? You're up in a panic. The dreams you had prior to that point were horrifying. And when you wake up, your respiration's fast. You're feeling anxious. You don't necessarily have an object for it because you weren't doing anything, and you are never going to get back to sleep again. If you got up in your PJs, went out into the street, and stood there until a car almost hit you, would you go back to sleep after that? You're not going back to sleep. Come back to the dinner table the next night because it isn't going to happen. Adrenaline has kicked in. Solve your blood sugar problems. Have the right snack before you go to sleep because this is your EEG. These are your brain waves when you are having a normal blood sugar level. And when your blood sugar level at night tanks down, that's what happens to your brain waves. They accelerate dramatically, like little flames of the fire that you've turned up. Oh, by the way, that is one bad blood sugar event earlier in the day. And look at the effect that it had at night. We're not talking about what happens at night. Manage your blood sugar during the day. If you don't know how to do this, get with somebody that knows how to do this. You've got to solve your blood sugar problems to sleep properly. And if you suspect you have some sort of craving for sugar after you eat, you want to go to sleep after you eat, you wake up in the morning and you're not hungry till 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 in the morning, you are frequently disinterested in some meals, get some help. I guarantee you something is off with your blood sugar. Or central fat. Your fat goes on, but it's only like the Milwaukee goiter, right around your belly here, and that's where it hangs out. You have a problem with blood sugar. Your blood sugar is the first of the Newtonian balls to hit. That's called Newton's cradle. Do you ever play one of these things? They're fabulous. Hours of fun. Pick one ball up, let it go, smack, 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 smack. One bad blood sugar event in your day can smack around all the way through your night. Cause you to be very erratic and not sleep. How do you manage your stress? How do you move yourself through this? Well, first you have to realize how important it is to take control of your stress. You have to realize that cortisol and melatonin are absolute opposite hormones in their function in the body. When your melatonin level goes down and your cortisol level rises, you wake up. And when your melatonin level goes up and your cortisol goes down, you go to sleep. That's the dance. Up and down, up and down. We just went to a contra dance and it was beautiful. And watching this twirling and moving, and it's just absolute opposites, and that's what happens in the body. These absolute opposites of the two fluctuating movements. But how in the world are you going to assess whether your cortisol and melatonin are working properly? The most direct way is spit. Spit. Spit into 4 different tubes and send it to a laboratory. Now, why am I not measuring it in the bloodstream? Because nobody's going to let me poke them at 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., and 12 o'clock at night. But if I hand you 4 tubes and say, spit, that's an easy, everybody loves to spit. Spit 4 different times during the day, and we can see the rise and fall. What you see in that green zone, by the way, that's the normal zone. Do you think this individual is having a problem in the middle of the day? Do you want this person doing your taxes in the middle of the day? I don't want to get in a discussion with this person in the middle of the day. Their cortisol level is 4 times higher than it should be. Not a happy camper in the middle of the day. Their blood sugar is probably off. This is not a good situation. And by the way, that is enough to trigger really bad sleep the rest of the night. If you don't want to do lab testing, here's a really simple way. Get a blood pressure cuff. They're cool now because they don't look like that. They're cool because you just kind of slide it on and let it do its thing. You press a button. But watch what you can do. When you are all sitting down now, your blood is pooling in certain places, usually around the waist and the upper torso. If I were to ask you to rapidly stand up right now, your blood is headed for where? Your head or your feet? Your feet. You would all pass out if there wasn't a really cool mechanism to protect you from passing out. That's your adrenal glands. Those are the glands above your kidneys that secrete cortisol. The moment that you stand up, a little cortisol and a little bit of adrenaline is immediately secreted in 6 nanoseconds. Why? Because it causes your blood pressure to elevate about 10 points. Why are we doing that? To keep the blood up in your head so you don't pass out. Healthy adrenal function makes your blood pressure increase a little bit when you go from sitting to standing. So how do you do the simple test? Sit down. Rest for a few minutes. Measure your blood pressure. Then stand up quickly. If your blood pressure increases 6 to 10 millimeters of mercury, you have healthy adrenal function. If your blood pressure doesn't change, get it checked. If your blood pressure goes down 1 to 10 millimeters, get it checked. And by the way, if it drops more than 10 points, and I will tell you lots of patients that I do this with have it dropping 20 points sometimes, and then I look at them and I'm like, you ever get a little dizzy when you stand up quickly? All the time. That's how I am. I just dizzy. That's not normal. It's not normal. Sometimes the physiology that we are used to isn't healthy. It's just average for us. We think it's normal because that's what we experience every day, but it's not healthy for us. The most sophisticated way to see your stress is to look at 2 principles. Now this is going to sound a little complicated, but if you stay with me, I'm going to make it really simple for you, and you can easily measure your stress at any point in time. There's 2 principles that go on to be aware of. One is that your heart rate doesn't have the same space between beats all the time. Now you can feel your pulse, some of you who know how to do that. You can feel it over here, or at least you can get a stethoscope and listen to yourself. The beats sound kind of regular, but if you measured them exactly, there's some variability between them. The healthier you are, the more variability there is. When you're under stress, like soldiers, your beats get tight. They get steady and they get regular, and there's no variability between the beats. The more variability between your heart rate beats, the less stress you're under. The more rigid your heart rate is, the more stress that you're under. The other side of it is this. When you take a breath in, your diaphragm drops, a big muscle, a tenth of a muscle underneath your ribs, and it tugs on your heart a little bit, and it makes it speed up. And when you exhale, your heart relaxes, and the rhythm starts to slow down a little bit. If we measure your breath coming in and your breath going out, and we measure your heart rate, we should see you breathing in and your heart beating increasing a little bit, and as you exhale, your heart should slow down a little bit. That's health. When you are under stress, there's not a lot of change. Your breathing doesn't positively affect your heart rate. Now, you're all stressed out now because I've just given you a lot of jibber jabber and no way to fix this. Trust me, there's an app for that. Relax. Steve Jobs, way up in wherever he is right now, and Apple in the sky has this thing figured out. There's an awesome app called Heart Rate Plus Coherence, those 2 things that I just said. Is your heart rate regular to a fault, or are you not coherent between your breath and your pulse rate? How does this work? All of us have phones that have this little flashlight on them or a strobe that helps us with taking a picture. You stick your finger on it, and someone figured out that if they turn that on and the camera on, you can see blood vessels. Guess what? Miracle of miracles, they've just created a phenomenal monitor of pulse rate. Very accurate monitor of pulse rate. It's on your phone already. You don't have to hook a dongle in. You don't have to do anything. You download the app and bada bing, bada boom, you're off and running. How does this work? You stick your finger on it and you turn it on. How easy is that? And it says you're under stress or you're not. Now, why do you want to know this? Because you leave your finger on there and you kind of breathe slowly and you think expansive thoughts and you go to a happy place. and you see how long it takes you to get coherence and normal heart rate variability. You could be at that thing for 20 minutes and it's not moving. You are in a serious boatload of stress. You may not even feel it, but then you think to yourself, well, what did I do? Oh, I had some alcohol last night. Oh, what did I do? I was up a little bit late. You have a way now of monitoring and measuring how your body is physiologically functioning without doing sophisticated tests. It's a really cool thing, awesomely cool thing. And lastly, how do you treat this? I love adaptogens. I love certain herbs and vitamins that don't make your adrenals speed up or slow down. They don't make your cortisol go up or go down. They support normal stress response by the adrenal glands. And they include herbs like holy basil and ashwagandha, Panax ginseng, rhodiola, eleuthero, and vitamins B5 and B6. Powerful. These are usually in a combination. And the more skillful the combination, the more awesomeness these bestow. It's something you can feel right away. Because whether you're at a low adrenal function or a high, an adaptogen doesn't care. It's there to be the keel. It's there to be the deep, steadying factor in your physiology that doesn't allow you to swing too high or too low in your stress response. But just kind of like the baby bear, just right. It's very cool stuff. What about exercise? The key to exercise is this. The time that you exercise may not be the most advantageous time for your physiology and for your sleep. Some individuals exercise in the morning because that's when they can do it. And it may be really perfect for them, but it may be really bad. And some individuals can't exercise till the end of the day because that's just how it works. They probably aren't sleeping necessarily well, or you'd be waking up in the morning shot out of a cannon and ready to go. And that's when you might choose to exercise. Your exercise pattern, especially one chosen too late at night, will disturb your sleep pattern. Now, you're like, I don't want to wake up any earlier. Fix the sleep problem. It's part and parcel of this. You have to untangle it. Change it around with some sleep compression. Alter the factors we've talked about up until now and start to change the timing of your exercise. If I exercise too late, I'm really too wired, and I can feel this to a great degree. Some physiologies can experience that, and they sleep really well and could exercise up until 10 at night and do really well. We're all individual. N value of 1, personalized lifestyle medicine. Figure out what works for you. But whatever you do, incorporate some yoga. Whatever you do, add yoga to the mix. I'll tell you a few cool things about yoga. Number 1, the poses themselves aren't as simple as they look. Just try them. They have really deep effects. I teach probably the most gentle, accessible classes of yoga in our yoga studio, and people come out of there like, what did you do to me? Not that they're hurting. They feel physiologically like something really big has happened to them. A small amount of time, even 20 minutes of yoga, can have the effect of several hours of sleep on your body. Now, I'm not telling you to do yoga instead of sleep, but I am telling you as you're working on your sleep compression, as you're working on figuring this out, you need a steadying force of rejuvenation. You need a way to tap into elements of restfulness in the brain in a way that will get you there immediately. Yoga produces that. The yoga elements that do this include the physical postures themselves. That includes how we breathe, what we think about during the yoga poses. You're kind of guided through that typically. And even there's some rituals around relaxation and sleep that you can learn in a yoga class. Nutraceutical patterning, which may be the thing that everybody's looking for. It's like, give me the pill. I just want the pill. I'm not going to give you the pill. I'm going to give you some pills to think about, but I'm going to tell you why first. Because these compounds have bioactive properties. They change physiology. Where do you think the little white pills with the little bit of cotton that are shoved into the little pharmaceutical bottles, where do the substances from those little white pills come from? Plants. Now, they're just refined and synthesized, but plants have bioactive properties and should be treated exactly the same. We don't use little stinky brown and green pills in the same way that we're using little white synthetic pills to try to force sleep without fixing some things. What is the purpose of this? The purpose is to get it back on track. The purpose is a little help, a little entraining of getting into sleep or staying asleep, but you can't do it in lieu of making the other changes. Thinking about your sleep, cognitive behavioral therapy, changing your diet, changing your exercise pattern, changing your mindfulness. Unless you incorporate it all, you're going to stay in a place that is using natural compounds a lot like pharmaceutical compounds, and we don't want to do that. We want to use it for the purpose of entraining. Now, we have 2 stages of sleep that we try to entrain with nutraceutical compounds. One of them is sleep initiation. If you get to the beginning of sleep and you're like twiddling your thumbs and your brain's awake and you can't slow it down, it's just running and you don't know what to do and you're in your right brain, happy thoughts, trying not to think about sheep. I bet you're all going to be thinking about sheep counting humans tonight. You're going to be like going through don't do that, but you're working with that and still the mind is racing. How do you initiate sleep? My favorite substances to do that include Tantalbit, which is very rare. Most people don't know about it, but it's quite effective. Quite effective. Passiflora, hops, valerian, and 5-HTP, which is a variation of tryptophan. These produce a sedative effect. These release and relax the mind. Now, the amount that you use, how you use them, you can experiment by yourself, you can consult with someone who's familiar with using these. They can be very effective to help you initiate the sleep process while you're entraining your sleep pattern. The next thing is retaining your sleep. How do you retain your sleep? You retain your sleep by staying in deep forms of sleep. The best thing we can use to retain sleep is melatonin. And many people tell me, I tried melatonin, I got to sleep, but I woke up. There's a reason for that. When you take in melatonin orally, you're replacing some of the missing melatonin that wanes as your lifespan goes on. And as we go greater and greater years, we make and manufacture less melatonin by nature. And then if we're in a bad, light, dark sleep pattern, we do even worse. But if you take in regular, immediate release melatonin, it will surge in your bloodstream like that black line, and within a couple hours, you'll be right back to where you started. But if you take melatonin in a modified or continual release format, it delays the curve, and you get the benefit of melatonin when you need it, which is not to initiate sleep. Many of you have mid-sleep waking, and this will help with that until you solve your blood sugar problems. Other interfering factors solve menopausal issues. Menopause affects every one of the physiologic processes I've described up until now. Changes in progesterone to estrogen levels, DHEA, testosterone, all affect blood sugar, heart rate, cortisol release, catecholamines. The response of the brain at its very primal level is affected by menopause. If you're having what you think are menopausal symptoms, and you're having hot flashes or night sweats, if you're having lability of your mood, if you're seeing changes in your body composition, get some help. Get someone who's knowledgeable to work with this and not just going to slap a bunch of patches on you and call it a day, but someone who really understands your physiology and is willing to work with you one-on-one to figure out and untie the knot of menopause. Other interfering factors may include GERD or gastroesophageal reflux disease. This is really silent for a lot of people. I can't tell you how many individuals will call in and say, my dentist just told me I may have GERD because my teeth are eroding away. It isn't always something you feel. People always think about these Pepcid commercials or Tagamet commercials or Zantac, and like they're thinking they have to have incredible burning with this. This is part of a bigger digestive issue. It's an entire workshop unto itself, which I'm going to resurrect in a few months, I hope, about how to get good, healthy digestion. However, solve this. Because if you're noticing a burning in the back of your throat, a persistent cough, when you wake up that there is an unusual thickening or a heavy sensation in the upper esophagus or swallowing area, get with someone who knows what they're doing to try to solve this digestive issue. And there may be some neurological considerations. We talked about manifestations like restless leg syndrome. By the way, restless leg syndrome where you can't really get yourself comfortable, you feel like your legs have variations from just being needed to move all the way through to pins and needles up and down them all the time, very frequently associated with a number of very common issues, some of them overlooked. I see an enormous amount of iron deficiency anemia associated with restless leg syndrome. Now, most physicians will miss it because they're not testing the right factors in the blood. They're looking for something a little bit too obvious, but the deep reserves of iron called ferritin will often be depleted, showing that there's an underlying issue that is undetected up until now. If you're suffering from something neurologic, sleep terrors, if you're waking up frequently at night and feel nerve pain, if you're noticing agitation in certain discrete parts of your body like shoulders, arms, feet, hands, work with a clinician to help you figure that out. These sleep patterns will not get you back into shape until you solve the underlying issues. How do we know tonight was time well spent for you? One, you know the 10 thieves. You may not like them. You may want to keep them in your life, but you know what the 10 thieves are that rob you consistently of sleep. And you know that you can measure this sleep score, and we'll talk about how to implement it in a moment. You understand the elements and the building blocks. You may not know for you what to do with them. And guess what? Nobody on the planet knows. You may need some coaching. You may want to go to somebody and say, okay, I understood all those blocks, but you got to help me put them all together. Or you may say, look, I'm going to start with one or two of them, and I'm going to try to put this thing together. I'm going to pick those that make the most sense to me. I'm going to make small, incremental scientific changes. But you can, don't deny yourself this, you can create a personalized sleep solution. You may not want to, but you have all of the elements to do it. All of the tools are sitting there in a toolbox. And you may not want to hear that I'm asking you right now to figure out how to use them incrementally. How much do you use the screwdriver, and how much do you use the hammer, and how much do you use the saw? You have to figure that out for your body with trial and error. That's how I would do it if you were working with me, except I've had 30 years experience and 70,000 patient visits. I use some lab testing and I can short circuit the process. But I'm not a miracle worker. I'm using the same tools here. I'm just crafting them more deftly because it's something I do every single day. But you have the capacity. It's an independent feeling I want to develop in you, which is you don't need me to do this if you want to entertain a rigorous, regular, small, incremental change that supports Ben Franklin's notion, which is the way you figure this all out is by trial and error, and you make small changes to your body. What do you do with these action steps? In more direct answer, measure your sleep score and do two things. Number one, grade it by section so you can get a sense that maybe something is going to surprise you. You may notice you have sleep apnea. Get yourself referred into a sleep clinic. You may find out that you're having elements of restless leg syndrome. Find out somebody that can work with functional neurology to help you figure out what might be happening to your midbrain. The most important thing from this questionnaire is your answer to the specific questions. Because if you look at the questions themselves, you're going to reveal something about the nature of things to yourself. You're going to see when blood sugar becomes a problem, or timing becomes a problem for you, or noise becomes... All of these elements and foundational blocks are evident from your sleep questionnaire. You will teach yourself what you need most to address by the intensity of the scoring that you have there. Develop your personalized sleep solution. Say, I'm going to do these 4 things. The rest of them, I don't think so, but I'm going to experiment with my sleep timing and my snacking and my diet during the day, the timing of my exercise, and maybe I'm going to put Amish into place 50%. Still like my cell phone at night and catching up with Facebook, but I'm going to do the rest of it. And lastly, please refine your program over and over again. It took me, once I found some building blocks, another year to get them just right. And you do this through embracing trial and error. Thomas Dekker said, sleep is that golden chain that ties health and our bodies together. It's mana. When you have it regularly and you haven't had it for your life, it changes your life. Go take control of your life by taking control of your sleep. Thank you.